Okay, so to get started, we have a disclaimer here that was requested for folks. There's a link to a usage tips and also a link to some advice on how you can use estimates produced from the IMBCR program. And then also note that the survey locations displayed on maps are approximated enough to prevent folks, from the public maybe traipsing onto private property or something like that to track down a sage grouse or something. Okay, so the Rocky Mountain Avian Data Center has nearly 1 million bird records, and so one of the ways that you're going to want to try to make the queries that you run when exploring our data run a little faster, not crash your browser, are to apply a set of filters. And so you can just click the drop-down menu here, and so you can filter by study design, bird conservation region, state, county, management entity, priority species list. So this is different lists. Could be species of greatest conservation need if you're with the state agency. It could be, I think Forest Service folks have different levels of priority species. You can also look at the partners in flight lists, and BLM as well has lists at the field office level. So if you're only interested in tracking those species, then you can filter out, and basically it'll preload a set of species for you. If you're interested in one particular species, say you wanted to see sage grouse locations or golden eagle locations from all of our surveys, you can just go ahead and load one or a handful of species one at a time if you like. Also, you can filter out our data and results by a particular year. And then most of you hopefully are aware that the IMBCR design is a stratified design. So oftentimes the strata is by land ownership or the management entity. So it could be a national forest, it could be a BLM field office. Sometimes we have a strata for different Department of Defense installations and that sort of thing. So feel free to contact me if you don't know what stratum you're interested in. I can help you out. Superstratum, it's maybe not the most intuitive name, but basically we can produce region-wide and statewide estimates for areas by combining, using a weighted mean of area by basically combining multiple strata together. So the state of Colorado is broken up into something like, I think, 34 different strata. If you wanted to get statewide estimates, that's basically just rolling up a bunch of individual strata estimates that are then calculated through a weighted mean, and we call that a superstrata. So anytime you're interested in kind of a larger, like a bird conservation region 17 estimate or a Colorado BCR 18, the BCR 18 portion of Colorado estimate, that would be a superstrata, and so you can use that filter. Study design. So as I mentioned, we are now using, in many areas, the IMBCR design. So I'll go ahead and just add that filter as an example. So you click here, a window will pop up down here. The internet's running a little slow. Oh, okay. Okay, so the IMBCR design is probably what many of you will be using. There are some partners that maybe it was a short-term project or something where they didn't think that they would be involved in the IMBCR design for a long period of time. And so we've done these, what we call overlay projects, where if you wanted to do intensive sampling for a year or two, but then probably would end it, that's what we often call the GRTS, or the GRITS design. Stands for Generalized Random Tessellation Stratification, and that is exactly what we use in the IMBCR, so those results would be comparable to statewide estimates, but it's just they don't contribute to the statewide estimates or regional estimates. And you can see we also do some work in the national parks and things, and so you can also filter by that design. But I'll just go ahead and, for the purpose of the demonstration, use the IMBCR, and then you would just click the Add Filter button here. And you'll see that appears here at the top of the screen. If I was also interested in, let's say, the Colorado statewide estimate, I can add the superstratum filter. And you'll notice that whenever you change the filters, this Run Query button turns red. And that's just to remind you that you're going to have to re-click that because you changed the search criteria. And so it's trying to eliminate confusion as to what you're looking at compared to the filters you have applied. So the Colorado statewide estimates are here. Add that filter. And then let's go ahead and say that I work for Game and Fish, Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And I'm interested in just looking at their priority species. So I can say State Wildlife Agency is Colorado, and then it's going to preload all of those priority species here. Now, suddenly this gets a little kind of clunky to look through all this, so I can also click this button that says Hide Filters. Or I could have Show Filters and then just scroll all the way down here to the map again. And you guys will probably all recognize this. It's just, Google Maps. You can zoom in, zoom out, either with the scroll bar, or if you have a roller on your mouse, you can do that as well. You do have to be careful if you want to scroll back up. You need to get your cursor away from the map and over here to be able to scroll up again. So I'm going to go ahead and hide these filters. And now I'm going to run that query. And whenever you see this, that means things are working. Sometimes it does get a little stuck, and you do have to click the Run Query button a second time if you don't see this happening. But for the most part, it's working pretty good. You can also change it between terrain and satellite features and things like that, just like in other applications of Google Maps. And so to back up again, just for a moment here, so we were in the Explore the Data tab, and that's what I'm going to spend the bulk of the time today talking about. But just to also make you aware, we do have information on all the different projects that RMDO and our partners are involved in. If you're interested in looking at our methodology or downloading some of our data sheets, you can go to our data collection tab and view, print, download all protocols and data sheets basically. We also have links to other databases. We're part of the Avian Knowledge Network, and there's links to databases out like through Point Blue Conservation Science and other things as well. If you're interested in our citizen science projects, we have some information there. And you can also review some of our past reports and publications as well, and download and as well. So when you hover over the Explore the Data tab, as I mentioned, you can view the usage tips. So if you forget something that's covered here today or have a question, feel free to look at that. And then I also think this is really useful, this using estimates. It's just a, half a page here of information, kind of how you can use these estimates from the work that we do. So you can compare across space and time. So if you want to compare your national forest to a larger regional estimate, and if bird populations in your forest are going up and they're staying stable in the region, then you might think that your management actions that you're doing in your forest are doing the right thing, achieving the desired result, that sort of thing. And then obviously you can look at trends over time. Estimates can be used to inform management decisions about where to focus conservation efforts. So in an area maybe with lower occupancy or density, that would be an area that would be prime for some sort of habitat enhancement project. Maybe areas with really high densities you might want to just try to preserve or maintain rather than do a lot of habitat manipulation. You can look at treatment areas if we've stratified at that level, and then compared to regional estimates to really directly evaluate management actions. You can also look at annual estimates of density and occupancy, compare them over time to determine population changes. If it's because the population is crashing, maybe because of something happening on the winter grounds or something like that. If it's declining at a regional level, then maybe if it's declining at a local level, it's not necessarily a cause of your management actions, so it's nice to have that regional comparison. And then also with occupancy rates, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. Basically, occupancy rates can be multiplied by the land area to produce an estimate of the area, the percent area, or the total amount of area that's occupied by a species. So if the species occupies 50% of the grid cells is 1 square kilometer, you know you have 100,000 kilometers, well then 50,000 square kilometers of your local area or whatever that you're managing likely are occupied by a particular species. With that, I'll go back into the exploring the data. Maybe it'll run a little faster this way. So I have the study design, adding that. We're going to do the IMBCR, add that filter. We're also going to do the priority species list for the State Agency of Colorado. I'm going to hide those filters so you can see what we're doing. And then also I'll do that superstratum, which is the Colorado statewide estimate. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and run that query again. Now you can see, so on the map, if it's an empty circle, that is a location where we have conducted a survey at least 1 year, and which none of the birds that were included in our set of filters were observed during any of the surveys that were conducted at that location. And then if there's a pink dot in the middle of the circle, then that means that one or more of the species that were included in your filter were found at that survey location. And so you can see, it looks like we found a state priority species at nearly every location here. And the nice thing too, you can hover over any location and it'll tell you exactly the transect number. Anything ending in a -08 at the very end signifies that's the year that it was retired, which means that that was a part of a, either this strata has been re-stratified, which I believe is the case with this particular one, or it could be that it was one of the old habitat-based surveys we are no longer doing. So this is a current survey. It doesn't have a dash and then 2 numbers at the end. And you can click on that, any of these. You might have to drag the map down here. It'll show you the year in which that survey location was visited. You can see the date that it was visited here. And then here's a list of all of the priority species, because that's within our set of filters, that were detected on that survey location, and then the associated number of detections. So we wanted to look at another one here. And you have to scroll the map down. This one was surveyed a little more intensively, so it's a bigger box. So this was surveyed back in 2009, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Again, you can see all the different dates. Pinyon jay is found in every year, and here's the associated number of detections. That's actually uniform across. So the question was, are the survey locations uniform across dots? And I'm not sure I'm getting exactly what you mean, but this is the same 1 square kilometer transect. And again, we only allow folks, this is available to the public, so we only allow folks to zoom in so far. In fact, this is as far as I can zoom in on the map right now. And that is, again, just to protect private landowners. Funding partners can contact myself or someone else with RMDO and be happy to get you a password. And what you can do is if you go to View Options, and you can enter that password right in here, and that will grant you access to be able to zoom in a greater detail to the map. So feel free to contact me about that if you're interested in a little more zooming capability.
It's you said 1 square kilometer, so it's a grid of points.
Correct.
Within that kilometer.
So
square kilometer.
Right. So our surveys with the IMBCR design are the sample unit is a 1 square kilometer grid cell, and within that 1 square kilometer grid cell, we put down a matrix of 16 points. It's a 4 by 4 matrix. So it's basically 4 rows of 4 points. Each point is 250 meters from its nearest neighbor. and we do our best to survey all 16 points in the morning. If weather happens to crop up, suddenly we're 3 hours into the survey and we're getting 30-mile-an-hour winds, we ask the technicians to cancel that survey. If they've at least surveyed 6 of the points, then they will not revisit it the next day. We'd rather them go to a new survey location and get another survey done somewhere else than spending time repeating the work that they're doing. So, so oftentimes we have 16, but not always. And private land is another one. Sometimes one landowner will own 8 points of a survey, and another landowner will own the other 8 points. One person says, yes, you can come on the land, and the other person says, no. Well, then we only get 8 points. Okay, so then the next thing you can do with the map is you can also add layers. And so if you're interested, well, where is Bird Conservation Region 18 within Colorado? You can click that and then just add the layer. Normally you can add layers. I'll show you the different layers that in theory would work. There's also BIA, Department of Defense, National Park Service, United States Forest Service, and then BLM field offices, and you can add them. You'll see different colors on the map, and then you can click on it inside of any of those, and a little label will pop up that shows you exactly what you're looking at. If it's for Conservation Region 17, it'll say Badlands and Prairies, BCR 17, and then you'll know. And you can kind of get a sense if you're not familiar with maybe the BCR or something that the field office is in. It'll give you a sense of maybe what would be a good comparable for you for a regional comparison to your local field office or national forest. So then moving on from the map capabilities, we'll get into some of the estimates. So there's this occupancy tab. There's also a density tab. They're set up very similar. Most of you might be familiar with our reports, and usually those are kind of the two big products from the work that we do is occupancy and density estimates. So occupancy it's just the presence-absence indicator, so it doesn't give you a sense of the numbers of individuals that are going to be present, but it'll tell you the probability that a particular species would be found in a 1 square kilometer grid cell within that strata. So in this case, we're looking at statewide estimates, so you can think of it, and I should say that it's hard for me to remember the Greek names and things, so you can hover over any of these column headings and a pop-up window or box comes up that tells you exactly what it is. So psi is the real meat and potatoes of this table. It is the estimated proportion of grid cells that are occupied. You can also think of it as the probability that any one grid cell within that strata or superstrata in this case would be occupied. So you can think of it that in 2010, 3.5% of the state, or of 1 square kilometer grid cells within the state, are occupied. And you can also think of it that if you basically randomly selected a 1 square kilometer grid cell within the state, that it would have a 3.5% chance that there would be a three-toed woodpecker that's occupying that site. Another kind of important column within this table is the percent CV, which is the percent coefficient of variation. This is an indicator of how good of an estimate we got for that particular species in that particular year. And as a general rule of thumb, percent CV less than 50 is a very good estimate. Between 50 and 100 is an okay estimate, and above 100 is a rather poor estimate. You probably wouldn't want to put a whole lot of stock into it. Usually it's just a product of sample size or numbers of detections.
So it was less than 50 is a good estimate.
Yep, less than 50 is considered a very good estimate. Between 50 and 100 is a pretty good or an okay estimate. And then above 100, you probably want to take that estimate with a grain of salt. So you can also sort by any of these columns here. So if I was interested in looking at, I wanted to sort by year, I can click that. If I want to reverse sort, I can click it again. Same with if I want to see the maximum number of transects that any of these species were detected upon. C, and oftentimes this transect number sort of relates to the percent CV. There's a detectability issue as well. Some species, we just get better estimates for than others because of their detectability. But in general, if you find that, we're getting them on only one transect, then the percent CV is going to be not quite as good as if we're getting them on 117 transects, then we have a really, really nice estimate. The other thing that you can do is you can save these tables directly to an Excel file. You can also just press the copy to clipboard and then open up an Excel and right-click and paste it into a table, and then that allows you to bring it into a report if you like or anything like that.
So that's for all, like the three-toed woodpecker, for example. That's based on all the, you call it transects, but that's a square kilometer grid, right?
Right.
Throughout the whole
kilometer
state,
grid,
including a lot of habitat that you would never find a three-toed woodpecker. Can you stratify by habitat anywhere?
We do not stratify by habitat anymore. And so back in 2008, RMVO and its partners kind of moved away from a habitat-based sampling scheme because there was a desire to look at how changes in habitat impact bird populations. And when we used to stratify by habitat, we would have a lodgepole pine transect and a fire would come through, and then we could no longer survey that transect because it did not represent lodgepole pine anymore. Now it represented a burned area. Now with this design, we would continue to return to that same site, and then over time we can look and see how the bird population and community changes with those changes of the vegetation. So there, I think, are a couple of Black Hills National Forest comes to mind. They stratified by hydrology layers, and other forests, I believe, have stratified by elevation. So they've broken up a single national forest into 2 or maybe 3 strata by elevation band. Some people have done it by soil type. We've also done it by hydrology. And that was in an effort to kind of target some of the priority species like Black Hills, I believe it was black-backed woodpeckers. They were trying to get more detections and a better estimate for that species. And so by stratifying by soil type or elevation or something like that, they were kind of trying to circumnavigate that and sort of get back to a habitat-based thing to get better estimates for some particular species. But by and large, it's mostly by land management or like sort of political boundaries, field offices, the BLM, and that sort of thing.
For each species, it looks like the top line is not by year, but by most number of transects. That's what takes priority. For example, the first species, it goes 2011, 12, 10, and transects go from high to low. Is that how it is? The transect for Trump, how this is laid out? Does that make sense? Oh, you did? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so the answer there was that I had previously sorted by transect and then sorted by species. So if I wanted to sort, have them all show up with species and then by year, I can do that. So now I last sorted by year, and then I click by species, and now you see that it goes 12, 11, 10, 12, 11.
But remind you, transects, that's more important. What are you honing in on?
I was just demonstrating the fact that you could sort by the different columns. What I would hone in on myself is the 4 columns that I believe to be most important would be the species, the year, psi is really the take-home. That is the estimated probability of occupancy. And then you also probably want to take in mind the percent CV to have a sense of how good of an estimate that is. You don't want to make a lot of huge management decisions with this percent CV of 150 because it's just not a good estimate. So we'll move on to the density estimate here, and it's quite similar to the occupancy you'll see. It does. So we have these kind of complicated charts, and I'll produce one has fewer species so you can actually kind of see what's going on with the plots. in general, if there's like more than 200 results, we by default do not generate the plot. You can click this button and say generate the plot anyway, but I will tell you that if there's over 200 point estimates on a single chart, it becomes very difficult to read. So it tends to not be particularly useful. So again, we're looking at density. This is the number of expected birds per square kilometer within, again, this would be the state of Colorado. So D, big D, is kind of the take-home here. It's the estimated birds per square kilometer. If you're also interested in total population size, that would be big N, which is, it's simply big D multiplied by the area. So in this case, the area of the state times 0.27, and that's the estimated total population size. Percent CV is the same. Little n is the number of detections that were used to generate the Colorado estimate. So there was 9 detections in 2008 for American three-toed woodpecker within the state of Colorado. We actually did use additional detections from outside of Colorado to help us estimate the detectability of the American three-toed woodpecker. In all of our estimates, we do account for incomplete detection. We know that our point counters out there do not observe every bird that is within, 500 meters of them or whatever, or on the plot. So we do account for that. Everything else is pretty much the same, so I'll move on to the species count. So this is our raw count information, and it also allows you to look at the amount of survey effort. If when you're looking at raw counts, you definitely want to take into account survey effort as well. You'll see counts are increasing, and you want to know if that's because the population is, or people were actually seeing more, or is it because they were spending twice as much time out in the field. So here's all of the different priority species for the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the raw count information by year. You can also break it down. So if I want to say within the state of Colorado, tell me by BCR, where are they getting them? You can also look at county by stratum, this is an excellent way for you to view all of the different strata that make up a superstratum. So in this case, all of the strata that make up the state of Colorado. And I can also look by management entity if I want as well. So I'll just go ahead and click by BCR. You'll have to click this button, refresh counts and effort. And it kind of reruns the query. Okay, so now you'll see multiple lines. So here with the American white pelican, I have a line for BCR 10, BCR 18, and BCR 16, and the associated counts. And then also, right here it says the effort is, by default, is displayed as the number of surveyed points. So remember I mentioned that within a 1 square kilometer grid cell, we put down 16 points. Technicians try to survey as many of those 16 points as possible. If I was interested in looking at the number of grid cells or true sample units that were visited, so 1 square kilometer grid cells, I can go to the View Options button, and right here there's a box that says Show Effort by Transect instead of by point. So now when I refresh this, save that. When I refresh that, it's going to give me the number of surveyed transects, and you'll see the number's a lot lower, but this is actually the sample size. A 1 square kilometer grid cell is considered a sample, and then it's repeat measures at the point count level. So something to keep in mind. So let's see here. I guess I'll just go ahead and also run through the rest of the options that you have. You can click it so that it will automatically refresh whenever you add or remove a filter. This is kind of nice if you find that you often forget to rerun the query. It is why we had it turn red whenever you change something. So it hopefully kind of catches the eye. Personally, I like to add several filters at a time. to run really specific queries. They run much faster. I get exactly the information I'm looking for. And so I like to keep this unchecked because if I want to add 3 species, every time I add 1 species, it's going to rerun it. And it's going to take a little longer.
How did you get to that option?
I clicked the View Options button up here. You can also have it so that it automatically refreshes whenever you change tabs, and we did make that a default. And by tabs, we mean switching between map, occupancy, density, and the species counts tabs. You can also click it so that it only shows species for which occupancy results are available. So right now, by default, if I have to back out of here to show you what I'm talking about. So if I selected a species filter here, click Add, and I get my species list, it's going to show you every species that we have an occupancy estimate for anywhere. And if I only wanted to see those species that we have a statewide Colorado occupancy estimate for, then I would click that box in the options. And it just, again, it kind of prevents you from maybe running a bunch of queries for, oh, I don't know, some like fox sparrow or something that maybe we don't get too many of, or a indigo and lazuli bunting hybrid. So anyway, that can be kind of nice. I believe we also have the same option for density results as well. And then, as I just went over, the effort by transiting to the points. I mentioned before that the chart for the density estimate did not get plotted because it had more than 200 results. If you always wanted to plot graphs with 300 results or less, you can go ahead and change that if you like. And then I also mentioned the password, that if you enter that in, talk to me, I'll get you a password, and then you can increase the zoom-in capability in the maps. And also, if you enter a password, you can then access raw data by clicking on this link right here. And then that would allow you to download all of our stuff. So if you want to do your own particular analysis, you could do that. Okay, oops. The other thing was, I'll just run through some of the other options up here. So you can, if you want to just reset and run an entirely different query, you can just clear all your filters and start from scratch. I went through the view options. You can also open a new query window, and this allows you, especially if you have a larger monitor, you can just have 2 queries side by side and be able to compare results more easily. So I think that's kind of nice. Showing the filters, I've already shown that. And then, so you guys are all going to be experts at running these queries on the Avian Data Center, but if you wanted to share some information with a colleague, the other thing that's pretty nice is once you have a list of filters set up, you can click this Generate URL button. And, oh, allow. So here it is. So it says copy the URL below to return the page with a set of filters. So you just simply right-click, copy, hit OK, and then you can paste that into an email. I'll just open up a Word document. You can paste that into an email. If I hit enter, it becomes a hyperlink, and then a colleague of mine can control-click, and it'll bring them to the Avian Data Center. It will preload all the list of filters, and all they'll have to do is click the Run Query button that will be red. So hopefully somebody with very little training can send them a link, and they'll get the gist of what you're talking about.